You know, there is something that has always stayed with me. My grandfather never went to the doctor. Not once that I can remember. And yet whenever one of us children got sick, fever, cough, a wound that would not close, he would walk out into the yard or into the forest behind the house, and he would come back with something, a bark, a leaf, a piece of wood soaking in water by the window, and it worked. It always worked. For years I thought it was just him, just something old. People knew that the rest of us had forgotten. But then scientists started running tests, real tests, in real laboratories. And one by one, they started confirming what my grandfather and millions of healers like him already knew thousands of years ago. Today, I want to shed 11 of those sacred woods with you. Woods that ancient healers swore by. Woods that were so precious people traded them like gold, protected them like holy ground, and passed down their secrets from parent to child for generations. And every single one of them, every single one, has now been confirmed by modern science. Just stay with me to the end, because the last one on our list was so sacred in ancient times that cutting it down was actually punishable by death. Number 1, frankincense. Now, if you grew up going to church, you already know this one. Frankincense was one of the 3 gifts brought to baby Jesus. And for a long time, people just accepted that without really asking. Why? Why would you bring a tree resin to a newborn as a gift? The answer is that in the ancient world, frankincense was medicine. Heao medicini. Healers in Egypt, in Israel, in Arabia, they burned it for wounds, for pain, for the mind when it felt heavy and dark. Some healers said it could open a door between the human world and God. Now, here is what made scientists stop and pay attention. When they analyzed frankincense in the laboratory, they found a compound inside it that goes after cancer cells, and only cancer cells, while leaving the healthy ones completely alone. They also discovered that breathing frankincense smoke actually changes something in the brain. It quiets anxiety. It lifts the spirit. The ancient healers who burned it to feel closer to God were not imagining things. The tree was genuinely doing something to their minds. My grandfather would not have been surprised at all. Number 2, cedar. When God told Solomon to build his temple, Solomon did not use just any wood. He chose Cedar, the finest cedar from the mountains of Lebanon. And the Egyptians, long before Solomon, were using cedar oil to preserve the bodies of their pharaohs to keep them intact for thousands of years. Think about that for a moment. These ancient people had figured out that cedar stops decay, that it keeps things from rotting, without a single laboratory, without a single test tube. Scientists tested cedar oil and found it contains compounds that break down the outer walls of bacteria and fungus, essentially dissolving them. It also turns out that simply smelling cedar wood increases the brain's production of serotonin, which is the chemical that makes you feel calm and content. Cedar trees in ancient healing lagas were not just tradition. They were quietly changing the mood of every person inside. Solomon built God's house from cedar. I think he knew more than he let on. Number 3, sandalwood. If you have ever been inside a Hindu temple or a Buddhist monastery, you know the smell of sandalwood. That warm, sweet, slightly woody scent that somehow makes you feel like everything is going to be all right. Ancient healers in India used sandalwood paste to bring down fevers and heal skin that would not heal. Monks burned it during prayer and meditation for thousands of years, and the trade routes that carried sandalwood across Asia was some of the most fought over paths in all of ancient history. People went to war over this tree. When scientists studied it, they found it kills the bacteria that cause skin infections and acne better than many modern creams. They also measured what happens to the human body when it smells sandalwood. The heart slows down, blood pressure drops, and the stress hormone in the body goes quiet. The monks who burned it to feel peaceful were not being superstitious. The tree was genuinely giving their bodies permission to rest. Number 4. Eucalyptus. Long before Australia was on any map that Europeans knew about, the Aboriginal people there had already spent 60,000 years learning the land. And one of the things they learned, one of the very first things passed down through every generation, was the eucalyptus tree. They pressed its bark onto wounds. They boiled its leaves and breathed the steam when the chest felt tight. For 60,000 years, this was their medicine for the lungs. Today, the World Health Organization officially recognizes eucalyptus oil for exactly that, clearing the airways, loosening the chest. Hospitals in several countries use it to clean and disinfect surfaces, and the compound inside it has been studied in over 100 scientific papers. 60,000 years of one people saying, "This tree heals the lungs," and science eventually wrote it all down and said, "Yes, you were right. You were right the whole time." Number 5. Willow. There is a bottle in almost every home in the world right now. Small white pills, orange bottle, the word aspirin on the label. Most people have no idea where aspirin actually came from. It came from the willow tree. Ancient healers chewed willow bark for pain and fever going back at least 3,500 years. The Sumerians wrote about it on clay tablets. The Egyptians used it. The Native Americans used it. Hippocrates, the man we call the father of medicine, wrote about it. Every civilization that ever lived near a river and saw willow trees growing along the bank eventually discovered the same secret. In 1897, a chemist took the compound inside willow bark, adjusted it slightly in a laboratory, and sold it to the world as aspirin. The most used painkiller in human history is just willow bark in a bottle. The ancient healers were not practicing folk medicine. They were practicing pharmacy. They just did not have a label for it yet. Number 6. Pau de Arco. Deep inside the Amazon rainforest, there are tribes of people who have lived there for thousands of years. And for all of those thousands of years, they have used the inner bark of a tree called pau d'arco, which simply means bow tree, to treat infections, fevers, and growths inside the body that we would today call tumors. They called it the divine tree, and they protected that knowledge the way you protect something precious. When Brazilian researchers finally started studying it in the 1960s, they found compounds inside the bark that cause cancer cells to destroy themselves without harming the healthy cells around them. The United States National Cancer Institute has been researching it ever since. The Amazon tribes never left their forest, but the secret they kept is now sitting on laboratory benches around the world. Number 7. Neem. In India, there is an old saying, Neem is the village pharmacy, and for at least 4,000 years, that is exactly what it was. Every morning, people would break off a small twig from the neem tree and chew it, not because someone told them to, because their parents told them to, and their parents' parents, and their parents' parents' parents, for 4,000 years. This was the toothbrush and the mouthwash and the morning ritual all in one. Scientists tested neem bark and found it kills the exact bacteria responsible for tooth decay and gum disease. They also found it fights malaria. The World Health Organization recognized it officially, and now researchers are studying neem as a natural alternative to the chemical mouthwashes sitting on store shelves today. For 1,000 years of a grandfather handing a child a twig every morning and saying, "Chew this." And science eventually looked at that twig and said he was absolutely right. Number 8. Olive. The olive tree is mentioned over 140 times in the Bible. In ancient Greece, it was so sacred that cutting one down was a crime punishable by death. Homer called olive oil liquid gold. Hippocrates prescribed it for over 60 different ailments and across the entire Mediterranean world. For thousands of years, the olive tree was not just food, it was life itself. Scientists studying the olive tree found a compound in its leaves and wood that lowers blood pressure and does it as effectively as a common blood pressure medication without the side effects. It also protects the cells of the body from the kind of damage that leads to aging and disease. The Mediterranean diet, which doctors today recommend to heart patients all over the world, is built almost entirely on what Hippocrates already knew 2,400 years ago. Ancient people did not just love the olive tree because it gave them food. They loved it because it kept them alive. And science has spent the last 30 years slowly proving them right. Number 9. Tea tree. There's a crisis happening right now in hospitals around the world that most people do not hear much about. Bacteria that used to be killed by antibiotics are no longer dying. They have changed. They have adapted. And the drugs that once worked against them are starting to fail. The Aboriginal people of Australia would not be entirely surprised. For thousands of years, they treated wounds and infections with the crushed leaves of the tea tree, a tree that the rest of the world did not even know existed until a few hundred years ago, when British sailors arrived and the Aboriginal healers shared their knowledge. The sailors started using it. Scientists tested tea tree oil and found it destroys one of those drug-resistant superbugs, the one called Mr. SA, that has become one of the most feared infections in hospitals today. The World Health Organization is now looking at tea tree as part of the answer to the antibiotic resistance problem. The Aboriginal healers were sitting on the solution for thousands of years. The rest of the world just had to catch up. Number 10. Birch. Every spring, in the forests of Northern Europe and Siberia, something quiet happened for thousands of years. People would make a small cut in a birch tree, collect the sap that ran out, and drink it. Not because someone proved it worked in a study, but because generation after generation had watched it bring the body back to life after a long winter. Siberian healers use birch bark in ceremonies for healing. Northern European grandfathers made teas from it for sore joints and inflamed skin. The birch tree was simply part of how you took care of yourself and the people you loved. Scientists studying birch bark found compounds inside it that target melanoma, one of the most dangerous skin cancers, while leaving healthy skin cells untouched. The United States National Cancer Institute has researched these same compounds as a potential treatment for HIV. And yes, the anti-inflammatory properties that made birch tea a grandfather's remedy for sore joints have been fully confirmed. The spring ritual of drinking birch sap was not just tradition. The tree was genuinely giving something back. Number 11. Dragon's blood tree. I told you at the beginning that we were saving something special for last. There is a tree found in the Canary Islands, in parts of South America, and known to ancient Arab traders, that does something no other tree in the world does quite the same way. When you cut into it, it bleeds. Not sap, not water. A deep, dark, crimson-red resin that looks exactly like blood pours from the wound. Ancient healers who encountered this tree did not treat it as ordinary. They treated it as sacred, as alive, in a way that went beyond what other trees were. And they used its red resin on wounds, on fevers, on infections inside the body, and they protected the tree fiercely. In some ancient cultures, cutting down a dragon's blood tree without permission meant death. Scientists eventually studied that red resin and found a compound inside it that speeds up wound healing by telling the body's own skin cells to move faster and build new collagen. They found it fights the herpes virus, and a compound taken directly from the South. American variety of this tree was approved by the United States Food and Drug Administration as a real pharmaceutical drug, one that is still sold in pharmacies today. The tree that ancient people protected with their lives is now producing molecules inside FDA-approved medications. They knew. They always knew. We just finally have the science to say yes, they were right. One last thing. My grandfather passed away when I was still young, but I never forgot the way he moved through the natural world, like he was reading something the rest of us could not see. Like the trees and the plants were talking to him in a language he had been taught and we had forgotten. What this video has shown us today is that he was not the only one. All over the world, across thousands of years, healers of every culture were reading the same language. And the most remarkable thing is not just that they were right, it is that so many of us stopped listening. These 11 trees were not accidents. They were not superstition. They were knowledge, gathered slowly, carefully, and passed from hand to hand across generations, until it finally reached a laboratory. And someone in a white coat looked up and said, "I cannot believe this actually works." Well, it works. It always worked. If this video reminded you of something, a grandfather, a remedy, a piece of the old world that felt like it mattered, please share it with someone you love. And subscribe, because there is so much more of this waiting to be told. Take care of yourselves, and maybe take a walk outside today. The trees have been waiting.